The Romans who crucified Jesus Christ did not originate this cruel form of capital punishment. They copied it from the Phoenicians, the ancient people of the region now occupied by Lebanon and parts of Syria and Israel, the same people who gave the Western world the alphabet. In the second millennium before Christ, the Phoenicians were renowned among their contemporaries as seafarers and merchants, exporting rare cedar and pine wood, fine embroidery and cloth, wine, metal objects, and a highly prized fabric dyed a passionate purple with the liquid extracted from the murex snake. The Phoenician city of Byblos, modern Jubail, was the port from which papyrus was sent by sea to Egypt and Greece, and the city's name is immortalized in many Western words: Bible, bibliography, library, etc. In addition to their many cultural achievements, the Phoenicians introduced death by crucifixion, which they exported to the Assyrians, Egyptians, Persians, and Carthaginians. In Carthage, crucifixion became not only a form of punishment but also a form of ritual sacrifice. The Carthaginian general Malchus, desiring a military victory, dressed his son, Curtalo, in royal robes, placed a crown on his head, and had him crucified in honor of the god Baal. By the time of Christ's death, however, crucifixion had become the most degrading and painful form of capital punishment in the Roman Empire. It was reserved for slaves and the most hardened criminals who, if they could prove they were Roman citizens, could benefit from another method of execution. The earliest cross was, in fact, just a vertical stake to which the condemned was tied and left to die of hunger and thirst. Later, Roman ingenuity gave rise to three types of cross: the crux commissa, shaped like a Y; the crux decussata or St. Andrew's cross, shaped like an X; and the crux immissa, with four arms in the shape of a T. The Romans also imagined a fourth cross, rarely used, shaped like rugby posts, from which the victim was hung by one arm and one leg. Regardless of the configuration of the cross, the events leading up to the crucifixion were established by law. The accused was first whipped, then small fragments of bone were driven under his skin to increase his suffering. Finally, he was forced to carry his cross, in whole or in part, depending on how much strength he still had, to the place of execution. He was called a crucifer from the Latin words crux, cross, and fere, to carry. After being completely stripped, except for the cloth wrapped around his waist, he was tied to one of the crosses. If he was convicted of a more serious crime, he was fixed to the cross with nails. The nails for the hands were never hammered into the palms. Because the palm has thin bones and can easily break, the nails were instead hammered through the stronger joints between the two large bones. Then the feet were fixed with nails hammered into a piece of wood called suppedanum or support, to prevent the body from falling off due to its own weight. Chroniclers of the time reported that a sufferer could remain alive for up to 2 or 3 days, unless, out of mercy, the bones of his legs were broken to hasten his death, or he was killed with a spear or arrow. After the victim's death, he was cremated with a cross. Capital punishment by crucifixion was never a very popular sentence in the courts of the city of Rome. However, it was frequently pronounced in the provinces and in the conquered territories. And the death of Christ, between two other crucified victims, indicates that this method was almost never applied to a single individual, the Roman authorities preferring to wait until several such sentences had accumulated and to stage the executions as a public spectacle. Occasionally, as in the case of the death of St. Peter, the condemned was crucified upside down. This inverted position was a kind of gesture of mercy, as it hastened the onset of unconsciousness. However, from a social point of view, reverse crucifixion was considered a more dishonorable method of execution. In the Roman Empire, the execution of condemned persons by crucifixion was abolished by the Emperor Constantine in 315 AD. However, it has reappeared in several countries. In France, as early as 1127, Louis VI, also known as Louis the Fat, ordered the assassin of Charles the Good, Count of Flanders, to be publicly crucified. Also in France, this punishment was reserved at various times for Jews and heretics. In Japan, until the beginning of the 19th century, certain criminals were executed by a variant of the classical crucifixion.